Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and I can't believe we're here. We're on volume 27 of Seraph of the End, and sadly, for now, this will be the last volume that we'll look at for Seraph of the End until volume 28 comes out. Now, the good news is, I know volume 28's cover probably hasn't been released in Japan because not all enough chapters are out, but I'm gonna kind of do like what I do with Toilet Bound Hanako-kun after this, in that I'm going to keep up volume to volume with this series because I really like Seraph of the End and I want to see how it ends and I want to see what's going to happen with it. So with that being said, my goal is to keep watching this series, keep reading it, and then do it volume by volume. So the good news is, even though we are going to be looking at chapters 111 through 114, which are 5 chapters for the volume, my assumption is that the next volume is going to be the next 5 chapters as well, which will be chapters 115, 116, 117, 118, and 119. The good news is 15, 16, 17 are already out. So, and chapter 117 is supposed to come out in September. So the good news is that by October, we'll already have volume 28. So that's good. After that, it'll suck because we'll have to wait 5 months, but we'll only have to wait a couple months to get volume 28 of Seraph. So that's really cool. So, as I do with the other series that I'm reading, that I'm catching up with, I will just update as we go, and as volumes of those manga come out, then I'll read them and react to them. And so that'll give me time to go back and also reread the chapters and catch up and refresh myself. The good news is I still have volumes 3 and 4 of Guren and Yu Catastrophe 16 to read, and I still have the Resurrection at 19 novels to read, because there's 2 of those. So my goal is that sometime around September, kind of at the midway point while we're waiting for chapter 118 to come out and 119, while we're waiting for that volume 28 to come out, I'll do a video where I'll talk about the novels. So it'll kind of refresh ourselves with Seraph of the End, in a way, leading up to that chapter, that volume 28. So that's the plan anyway. So yeah, the week after this, I'm going to be starting a new series, and so that will be fun. I'm excited to start a new series, but I am sad that I'm caught up, especially because now we're getting answers. We're finally getting to find out answers about the series just in time for me to catch up. How? So the good news is you all are pretty much just a little bit ahead of me. So by the time that volume 28 gets finished, the contents of it, I'll be able to react with you all, and then we'll all be caught up, and then you guys can wallow in the craziness as I wait for the following chapters for volume 29. So we'll see, right? But I'm pretty excited about that. We've only got these 5 chapters, so it's going to be a little bit shorter video, I'm sure. Maybe not. Maybe there'll be a ton of content, though. But I'm really excited to get into this volume and talk to you all about it. So let's not waste any more time. As sad as I am that we're going to be catching up with Seraph right now, I am really excited to see what we're going to get at in terms of more answers, more into the lore, and more into Mika and Yu's new development. So we're going to start volume 27 of Seraph of the End, chapters 110 to 114, here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. I hadn't counted on bringing a whiteboard out for this volume because I was like, oh, it's just 1 volume. It's just 1. It's just 4 chapters. What's the big deal? 5 chapters, whatever. But oh my God! Finally! We finally have answers, and it's all coming together. I was like, okay. I feel like it's such a good time. Like right as I get to where I'm caught up with this series for a couple months, it's all coming together, and I'm like, oh my God, and what a twist that Yu has to decide now. They all have to decide whether to bring Mika back or everyone else. Because I was asking so many questions. I'm so glad y'all didn't spoil me, because I was asking so many questions with the last 2 volumes. I was like, okay, why does Sikamado want to bring Mika back? Mika is a demon inside of Yu. How's that going to work? How's he going to be brought back? What's going to happen? Obviously Sikamado wants Mika back for reasons, and that's still... Farid's motivation all makes sense now. Everything is making sense. And I was like, oh my God, it's all... I feel like Kronk, where he's like, it's all coming together. And I was like, this volume was everything I wanted out of this series so far, and it's the perfect place to pause until volume 28 comes out. It's the perfect place, because it answered all my questions. I feel like it felt like a cliffhanger, and it is. And guys, I'm so excited. So yeah, let's break this down. Man, you actually being, I really liked Yu in this volume. I was like, good. Him actually being like the whole yes or no questions, we'll talk about it. But man, So Mika being the little cat demon. I love that Mika has little cat ears, the demon. He has the big fur coat and everything. He looks very, very regal and distinguished. But him being like, answer me, damn it, you. And them all, like, he clearly doesn't trust any of them. And he's like, look, he's like, everybody's in cahoots. They clearly have planned all this stuff. Shouldn't we find out what's going on? And I love that Mika is inside of Yu's head. I love that Yu can't avoid him anymore. Because throughout the entire anime and leading up to where Mika was a demon inside of him, Yu could just be like, oh, Mika, and brush him off and just be like, la, 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 and like off in his own world. And now Mika's like, no, you have to listen to me, Yu. I'm in your head. You're not getting rid of me. Listen to me, damn it. And so I kind of love that. I was like, yes, that's wonderful. But then I also love that he has that little cattail whenever Yu's like, I've got a plan. It like twitches, or whenever he gets mad, twitches. I'm like, I'm all about it. I'm just like, yes, this is wonderful. It's so good. But just the idea of talking about Guren versus Yu and their concept of family. And man, I was wondering going into this why they kept focusing. They kept talking all about Yu in this family business. Like, they made a point multiple times in these last couple chapters to be like, Yu's like, we're a family. We're not giving up on anybody. We're gonna do this because we're a family. And then it's all been a big lead up for the mangaka to be like, okay, Yu, you're all about family. You're all about saving this collective that you believe in. So are you going to save their families, or are you going to save Mika? It's like, it took everything he was saying and just completely flipped it around. Like, so what are you going to do now? Are you going to be a hypocrite? It's like, it's not really that he's a hypocrite, but it's like, are you going to stick to your guns and what you've been preaching the last 3 or 4 chapters? And now what are you going to do with this? Because Mika is Yu's family. So it's like, is Yu going to be selfish or not? So I want to bring up Guren and Yu right here. Guren and Yu. And they're very similar characters. Now, what I like about this is that we've gotten some reveals. The stuff that was talked about in the flashback where Guren could have chose, I knew that Guren like chose to sacrifice to bring back the others. Like, we've all been led to believe that. I'm curious now to get into the novel, especially with what Rigor said, to see more about that. But it's all making sense, right? So I like that both of them have said that they've been selfish. They've been selfish about their family. Because both of them have been. They both have been willing to do anything to save their family no matter what, even if it seems selfish. And this series does kind of an interesting thing where a lot of series are like, oh, you shouldn't be selfish. You shouldn't think of yourself. But this series is kind of like, no, it's fine. As long as, you know, you're doing it for the right reasons. And so I like that Yu says he's grateful to Guren. And honestly, the most heartbreaking thing about this entire volume is that Yu admits, he's like, if it wasn't for you, I would have probably killed myself. And I'm like, and everybody's just kind of like, oh shit. But Yu's like, no, he's like, I lost my will to live without my family. And he's like, and you saved me. So for that, I like you for that. And I'm thankful and I trust you. And so this entire series has just built up Yu's feelings of trust, of being grateful, and of like love and caring towards Guren for saving him. Because yeah, this whole series we've been like, why is Yu so dedicated to believing in Guren? And Mika and the others have asked it countless times, being like, why do you care about Guren? He's done this, and he's betrayed you, and he's betrayed our trust. And Yu's always been like, no, I trust him completely. Let's go with it. Let's try to rescue him. And it's been a constant question in this series of why does Yu feel so desperate to save Guren? And it's because Guren is literally his savior. He's like, if it hadn't been for you, Guren, I would have probably killed myself. And if I'd done that, then I never would have saw Mika again or met these other friends and developed the family that I have now. So he's like, I trust you because of what you've done for me. He's like, yeah, you may have used me, but I'm okay with that because you've kept me alive. And so it's such an interesting thing. And Guren is kind of like, because Guren has constantly been like, I feel like in the novels, what we see of Guren, he's not ever at a point where he doesn't want to live, but he's always feeling helpless. And so there is a difference there. So there is a feeling of being helpless versus losing the will to live. Yeah, because there's a feeling of helplessness, but it spurns him to become more determined. Guren is a little bit like the character where he's more determined from that helplessness, and he's like, Guren's like, I'm willing to go any way I can to get what I want, whereas you just kind of gave up. And so if it hadn't been for Guren, then you just wouldn't have moved forward. So, and that Guren kind of goes back to that where he's like, if we had just given up and Shinya and I had died, none of this would have happened. And kind of did that same thing that Yu was thinking about doing, but it ended up not going through with it. So that's interesting. And then I love Yu's plan. Yu's like, I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to say yes or no. And if not, I'm going to destroy this truck and walk away. I'm like, and that's so perfect for Yu. It fits his character. It fits his resolve. It fits how simple Yu is. He's just like, I'm going to ask you yes or no. And you just answer. And so he's like, do you like me? And Guren's like, yes. Are you using me? Yes. And so he's like, yeah. And he's like, were you in cahoots with Farid when he showed up to murder my family? And I love that he's like, Guren's like, about that. And he's like, nope, that's not a yes or no answer. And so he just gets he gets Mika to help him. And God, the battle between Maharu and Yu is just, it's between Maharu and Mika, it's so good. And he's like, I said yes or no. Did you kill all of our families? And I like that Guren's like, well, I can explain. He's like, that's not yes or no. God, I love it. It's so good. Like, I want to see this animated, damn it. It's so good. I'm just like, and them just clashing. And I love that they're just hanging on the side of the buildings. Like, I just see this animated and it would be so great. And he's like, and I like that Guren is acknowledging that Yu's gotten stronger. And he wants him to be stronger. And Maharu's like, I'm going to keep poisoning him so you don't lose. And I love that Yu is like, look, he's like, this is exciting. What can happen next? And Mika's like, you have a powerful desire to make Guren respect you. And here's the thing, too, that's cool about this is that Mika, I feel like Mika throughout this whole series, while he was human, was constantly concerned that he was jealous and concerned that you liked other people besides Mika. And so now that he's inside of Yu and he can feel all of Yu's emotions, he's like, oh, you have this desire to make Guren respect you. And he's like, yeah. He's like, you like him, don't you? And Yu's like, yes. But I don't think Yu doesn't like Guren romantically. No, to him, Guren is like a father figure or a big brother. Like, he's like a figure he respects. He's like, yes, I respect him, but I want to surpass him. Like, that's such a cool thing where Mika's like, oh, so you don't love Guren, you just want to surpass him and make it to where he can lean on you and rely on you. And it's like, it's so good. And he's like, I'm devouring that desire. And he's like, we can be more powerful yet. And I love that shot of him up in the air just jumping, about to go at him. It's great. It's great, that shot of him and seeing Guren and Yu face each other. It's wonderful. And just that flicker and it just going across the screen. Oh, it's so good. These chapters were so good. This is probably one of my favorite volumes. It's probably one of my favorite volumes in all of this. And I can't believe that we're now caught up at the part where it's really good. And I love the little defining family where he's got the little stick waving and Guren's like walking behind him as he's grown up. And so yeah, the idea is that Guren has like watched over Yu all of these years and been kind of like a parental figure to him. It's really great. But man, so Maharu and Mika like poisoning each other, and then Yu just results in headbutts. Yu's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna headbutt you, Guren. If I can't stab you and I can't fight you with Mika, if our swords are gonna clash and I'm gonna lose because of it, then I'm just gonna have to beat you this way. And in true protagonist shonen fashion, he's like, headbutt time it is. And I love that both of them, Maharu and Mika, try to give Yu and Guren more power, and they're just like, no, I'm gonna keep headbutting you and kicking you. And then everybody else is just watching. Like, Kimazuki and Mitsuba and Yoichi are like, are we just gonna like watch them beat the snot out of each other? And then Cruel's like, well, this is barbaric. And I like that Farid is just like, because now we know all about Farid's whole deal with all this, why he has a stake invested. Mwah! Oh, when we get to it, I'm gonna be so excited. And then Shinoa's like, damn. And he's like, if I don't win, you'll never lean on me. And so I have to beat you. And I love that Mika's just sitting there looking like, I love Mika and Shinoa in those panels side by side where they're like, so that's where we're going with this. That's what we're getting at. And then we see Guren all alone. And I love this exchange between Guren and Maharu. I love this, where he's like, he's throwing his honest feelings at us. If we're just going to trick him, what's the point? And she's like, well, I don't see the point in losing. He's like, do you really want to lean on him? She's like, do you want to give in and acknowledge his feelings for you? And he's like, I'm so weak. And I love her saying, oh, you're not. But then I love that exchange where she thinks about it and she's like, no, you are. But it's that weakness that Shinya and I admire. You're an idiot who's not afraid to admit weakness while still trying so hard to save the world. Do whatever you think is best. So yeah, so at the end of the day, Guren acknowledges that he's weak, but he keeps going. He keeps going to try and save the world. And then it's funny because you kind of, he has all this strength. He seems or believes that he is weak. But he has a strong core to him. Like, Yu's whole thing is he is strong. Like, he has a strength to him. It's just he has to tap into it. And Guren's whole thing is Guren's not strong, but he keeps trying anyway, regardless. It's like he's like, it's insanity. He keeps trying to fail. He keeps trying not to fail and do the same thing over again. But God, I love these pages of them. It's great. And he decides to let Yu win. And I love this page where he's like, was it you who murdered my... Like, they're both, like, bloody faces and everything. He's like, was it you who murdered my family? He's like, I did. I'm sorry. And you could see Yu being like, oh. Like, the honesty of it. Like, it washes over him, and you see him, like, get mad, and then he's like... And he, like, wells up, and he gets all determined. God, it's so good! And then he says, I forgive you. And Guren's like, why would you do that? And he's like, I did it for my own selfish for my own selfish reasons. And he's like, you're the victim. And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, but none of that matters. We're family. And so I like that Yu in all of this, he's like, the past doesn't matter. It's the present. And that reinforces his decision at the end of this volume where he's going to pick Mika over the other ones that have died already. He's going to be like, well, the past is the past. They've all died. We couldn't stop that, but we could bring back Mika. He's already right here. Why not bring him back? So it's like, oh, that's such a great twist and tie-in that he kind of frames his answer right here when he's talking to all of them, but Guren's answer is also framed in that conversation with Maharu. And so I love that they all form this little hand thing with him, and they're like, you aren't alone, Guren. Take our hands. And I like that he instantly remembers Shinya and the others. And he's like, shut it, stupid you. Baka you. And then, God, that shot of them, like, all together, them finally, like, coming to terms with Guren. And I like that Farron has to make it worse. Farron has to just, like, break. We have this really nice moment with all the parallels of Guren's squad with this current squad. It's really, like, it's emotional. There's, like, feels. And then Farron's like, oh, we're following this plan, so that makes us family too, Cruelzy. And she's like, I'll kill you if you say that again. God, Farron and Cruel. I love Cruel's, like, Cruel's just like, I hate you. It's great. And then she just knocks his head off, and Curly's like, well, we should be used to this at this point. And he's like, and then Farron is like, watching them really reminds me how alone I've been my whole life. Like, Farron's nihilism and him just being alone and being like, oh yeah, you know, it's a shame they've had all this friendship. I've had none of that. Can't wait to die. It's like, and so I like that they asked Guren, they're like, we need to know the truth. And he's like, fine, I'll tell you the truth. It just took him 2 more chapters to get through. I was so mad when we were going to go over to, like, I'm glad the last chapters we've read are longer chapters, because when they got to Rigor in them, I was like, are you really not going to tell us these things? But no, instead, we get the whole thing with Sikamado and Mikaela. So, I'm going to alter this probably as we go. But Sikamado and Mikaela. Now, is Sikamado a fallen angel? I'm going to guess yes at this point. Who becomes a vampire? Gonna guess so at this point. But they referred to Mikaela as the cursed child. Which makes me think that maybe, is he like half angel and half human? Or is he half demon? I wonder if he's half demon. Because they make the Sikamado reveals that they don't have a gender. So that's interesting, that they are genderless. We got a non-binary Mika up in this, right? Because I really like how the author's like, Mika and you are a ship. They're a ship. They're a couple. Because he's like, as a child, he's like, my son is currently dead. I actually sympathize with Sikamado in this because he just wants his kid back. And he's obviously, I don't sympathize with the fact that he's like sacrificing hundreds of thousands of people to get there. But you get, he just wants his kid back. And that kind of ties the whole thing about selfish desires in this story that's so fascinating is you kind of, the mangaka kind of puts you in a place where you can't dog Sikamado too much because their whole goal and purpose is kind of the same gesture as what they're doing. Like you saying, oh, well, fine, whatever means necessary to protect our family and bring them back to life, sure. Guren's like, whatever means necessary to bring our family back to life and protect them, sure. That's kind of what Sigamado's doing. Sigamado's like, whatever thing I have to do to bring my son back to life, sure. So you kind of can't, the creator kind of puts you in a corner where if you're going to support Guren and if you're going to support you kind of are wondering if they're much different than Sikamado. So at least in that regard, at least in regard to their goals. Now, the means in which they try to accomplish those, yeah, there's some difference there. But I like that Yu says, oh, it'll be like those fairy tales you tell me of the prince rescuing the princess. I'm the prince then, right? So establishing who is the top and bottom in this relationship, well, obviously Yu. So I like that we have Yu and Mika as the prince and the princess. But, as Sikamado says, neither Mikaela nor I have genders like humans, so I can't say whether he could become a proper princess. And it's like, huh. And so I like this dialogue that they have here in this volume, where he's like, oh, what was it, a poison apple or a spindle? The prince comes along and gives her back her life with a kiss. And Sikamado says something like that, I believe no matter the era of the kingdom, they all have a story that plays out the same way. Funny that. Like it all had, every culture, everything has a similar story that talks about those same things. I suppose it's because humans have genders to differentiate them. And that's an interesting commentary by the mangaka too. That's a really interesting commentary that they're like, oh, well, they just gave these characters different genders so you'd be able to tell them apart. I'm like, I find that really funny. That's the whole, it's like the creator is justifying gender because it's a storytelling aspect. They're like, oh, well, these societies created different genders to show the different biologies, just to say, they're different. It's like, oh, huh. Now, I know, obviously, there's differences between men and women biologically. I get that. But I just think it's a funny commentary that Siga brings up here. And so, Yu says, maybe I could try kissing Mika. And Siga's like, well, that's not enough. I've devoted tens of thousands of years, but I haven't created quite enough sacrifices to bring him back. So, and then Yu's like, what's a sacrifice? And Siga's like, I'll explain later, child, you're one. And so we have this idea. We still don't know exactly what Yu is and why or how he's cloned. He's called a demon spawn, but we don't know a lot about Yu. We don't know exactly why Siga has him, where he came from. Is he a demon child? Is that why he's tied to Mika? We don't know. And the mangaka, the author, is not giving us a lot to work with yet, so that's still a big old mystery. But what we do know is that he has spent tens of thousands of years gathering gathering sacrifices. Which we can wonder if those are vampires, even though Rigor and Erd are the last ones when he leaves. He's like, I thank you for always being with Mikaela. And so then he says this weird thing. He's like, I keep Mikaela company. I'm going to go increase humanity's numbers a bit more. Like, how are you going to increase humanity's numbers, Siga? Like, what? And he's like, I've got this secret that Mika talks to me. So that's curious. So he has the power to increase human numbers. He tells Erd and Rigor that he's not God. So there's that. He's like, sometimes Mika talks to me. And I like that Siga's like, oh, well, no, he can't talk to you. You know, he hasn't spoke to me, his parent, eons. If that's true, it's quite cruel. And so there's that whole debate, right? So you have this whole thing about the parent and child, right? Yeah. So I like that you says that Mika speaks to him. All right. And Siga says that Mika does not to him. But he's like, oh, that'd be really cruel. I've been trying to bring back my son for eons. Why wouldn't he talk to me and talk to you, random little boy? And so that's so interesting. So now the question is, of course, is Yu telling the truth? Is it all in Yu's head? Does Yu and Mika have this psychic connection that Siga and Mika don't? And so that's why it's happening. But I think that's interesting to parallel the idea that Siga could be disturbed by the fact that his child that he's tried so hard to bring back to him won't speak to him. I think that's a cool parallel to when we talk about Rigor later on, and Rigor's like, I'm your kid, I'm your child, you made me, why can't you speak to me? And Siga's like, I don't want to. So it's an interesting parallel and kind of connection there. It's interesting. He's like, let's bring him back, both of us together. He's like, oh, I promise. And so then the mangaka is breaking the fourth wall by having all of these characters be like, Guren, you said you'd tell us the truth. You haven't told us yet. You want to do that now, please? And Guren's like, let's get to where we're going, which all makes sense now. It does make sense that he wanted to wait until he got to the coffins to reveal everything, because that would give you the maximum potency to convince everyone to bring back humanity instead of Mika once you saw all these people next to you. Right? So it all makes sense. The creator's like, no, I have a reason Guren is waiting to tell you. We have to get there first. And it's like, so, God. Okay. And so I like that Kimizuki's like, I've been quiet this whole time. My sister's dead. I need explanations. We don't know anything. Please talk. And Yoichi even, I love that when Yu is like, Yoichi, go ahead. You say what's next. And he's like, remember you killed my sister? So, explanation for that, please? Like, I just love that everyone's going through this. And Guren's like, look, I'm going to do one sentence to answer all your questions. I'll bring your families back to life, so sit down and shut up. And he didn't lie. He's not lying. He does have a plan to bring them all back to life. And we finally find out what that plan is. But Mika's like, what's the price? What is the price? He's like, bringing the dead back to life has a cost. You caused the catastrophe, so what is the price? So, we don't know exactly, because I've not read the novels all the way through to know for sure. But we don't know exactly what it is. We know the price back 8 years ago. The price was humanity. Humanity over 14 to bring back 7 people. That was the price, which is a lot. And so now the price is a lot, it's a lot bigger of a number to bring back, and the price is a lot higher. But again, I really like this thing with Shinoa. Shinoa getting to have a say in this chapter was really great too, where she's like, look, she's like, Guren, you've blamed yourself through all of this, but honestly, is it entirely your fault? She's like, you know, this has all been Sikamado's plan from the beginning. Like, everything with the Hiragis, everything with Ichinoses, everything with all the experimentation. She's like, this has all been planned. So you think you have a part in it, but really, what you did is a drop in the bucket to what's been happening. And I like that Guren's like, Guren won't accept that because Guren's like, no, there's a part of Guren in the novels that is all about his free will and all about him being responsible and having agency. And he struggles with that because there's a lot of situations that happen in the novels so far that he doesn't have control over. And Guren struggles with that because he wants to maintain some semblance of control in his life. And so Guren, you get why Guren's arguing with Shinoa, because he's like, no, you saying that this was all Sikamadu's plan means I'm just a pawn. And he's like, and Guren's whole thing is, I don't want to be a pawn. So it makes sense why Guren argues with her and is like, no, listen. He's like, listen, Linda. He's like, look, no, I made my own decisions. Shinya said if we just died, we would have won, because then they couldn't have brought any of us back. And then Shinoa is just struggling because she's like, look, I don't want you to feel bad. Shinoa doesn't want Guren to feel bad that Maharu and her were used, because Shinoa kind of admits what you did. To Shinoa, Guren is kind of a savior. She's like, you saved me too, so I'm tired of you feeling like this is all your fault. But Guren's like, I have agency in this. I did make the decision. I could have not, and it may have happened anyway, but that's not the point. The point is I did something. He's like, and the result was that humanity was wiped out. And she's like, I don't think it was your fault. And he's like, that doesn't matter. And so she tries to ask everyone what they think too. And she's like, the whole reason I'm here is because of you. And I like that Yu finally breaks her up and he's like, look, Shinoa. He's like, all the blame talk is meaningless. What the heck are you even doing? I love it. I love that Yu was finally like, enough of this. Like, I'm tired of it. He's like, we're going to do this hand-holding thing as long as we have to until y'all just get over it. He's like, it's all about the present now. We just had to do what we had to do, and that's fine because we're family. And everybody's like, okay. And I love that Mika's like, didn't we just get done with this whole like team circle thingy? Do you want me to do it? And he's like, we'll do it as many times as it takes. Which makes sense that Mika doesn't want to be part of it because later he's going to be the one ousted on the outside. But yeah, and then Cruel. I love when he's like, Cruel. And she's like, I'm not part of your sappy family. Show your respect. I love it. I love that she's like, no. Cruel's like, absolutely not. And he says, we're family. And so forget the past. The future is more important. Who cares if this was Sigma's plan? We're going to fight for our family and do whatever it takes. Which, again, it's so funny because on the one hand, Yu is saying, I'm going to live for the present. Mika's in the present. These people have died in the past. It's already a done deal. There's no point in bringing them back, but Mika can come back. But on the other hand, he's also acknowledging that their families are important too. So what a dilemma. What a conflict. So I like that Mika finally is like, let's get back on track. Mika's like, okay. So we get all this explained. I was like, it all has come together. And I'm like, oh, there's still a lot with Yu that is enshrouded in mystery, and a lot of Sikamado and Mikhaila that's shrouded in mystery, which is fine. But I feel like this part here, it's all come together. And I'm like, okay, great. We're finally getting answers. So what we find out is that if you break a taboo, there is divine retribution. Now, the question is, did that first taboo that Sikamado break, did that result in his son dying? And that started this whole catalytic thing. Like he was a fallen angel from that point. His son was killed. We don't know, right? So there's that. And the Seraph of the end that we find out controls that retribution. So that's the angels that come home. So if we find a way to control the Seraphs, then we could break a taboo and so Mika advises that, okay, Mika's plan is that if we just control a Seraph, then we're in control. It's like that on the surface, that seems like the easy answer. Well, if you can just control a Seraph at the end, then we can just break the taboo and still bring people back and it's no big deal, right? So we know that Yu is a Seraph of the end. We know that Yu and Mirai were a Seraph of the end, so we don't know about the others. And I like that Guren's like, no, it's not that convenient. There's a stupidly massive price. So Guren is like, we can control a Seraph of the end, but the control has a price. A massive price that they found out about. And I like that Guren says, Kimazuki, Yoichi, you, Mikaela, you want to bring your families back, right? And I like that at that point Mika's like sparking. He's like, what are you saying? He's like, resurrecting the dead is a curse. If you want to keep fighting, you'll wind up cursed like me. And he's like, fine. If it's what we have to do for our family, then we'll do it. What's the price? And I was so mad at the start of chapter 114 because I was like, are you kidding me? You're going to have us like go. He's like, tell us your ultimate plan. Like, what's the ultimate goal? What price are we going to have to pay? And how will it curse us? And then we go to Rigor. I was like, are you joking? I was afraid that they were going to end this chapter and not tell us. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? But no. This chapter 114, it's like one of my favorite chapters. We can have our cake and eat it too, because it's like they finally give us all these answers. So, Rigor is interesting in this. He's like, what is your ultimate goal? And Sigma's like, you know what my goal is. My goal is to bring my kid back. And he's like, he was your son. And so Siga, or Rigord is like, I was your first guinea pig, right? He says I was your guinea pig at first. He's like, a potential body to house Mikaela, as was Erd. So the question is, so what is brought up here is that the vampires were created as immortal bodies to possibly house Mikaela. Which ends up seeing what Yu becomes, but Yu's not a vampire, so it's interesting. But that's what Rigor theorizes. He thinks that all these vampires were originally created to house Mikaela, because like at that point you change your tactics. And so we see Erd and Rigor when they were first found and bought from the slavery house. He's like, you promised us eternal life and then discarded us without a second thought. And Siga's like, oh, did you hold a grudge? It's like, yeah, he did. He did hold a grudge. He's like, well, I needed a reason to keep living. The days would become so boring. And so then he says he found in Kyoto that Siga had founded a human organization, the Emperor's Demons, which was the Hiragi family, right? It was this religious cult that was conducting experiments to turn demons and vampires into demons. And then Siga's like, yeah, you interfered. So I can't wait to hopefully see some of this in the novel. You injected your own genes into the Ichinose family and founded a competing organization. So, injected his own genes. So, what we're saying is that Rigor might be related distantly to Guren and the Ichinoses. Like, okay, maybe there's a chance of that. I'm like, can vampires have sex? I don't know. Or did inject their genes mean like he took some of his like DNA and put it into somebody? Kind of like the experiments they did on Shinoa and Maharu. I'm guessing it's more along that line, but I don't know. He's like, Kokuya means 100 nights. And now we get the whole meaning of the 1,000 nights, where he's like, it's to make you pay for abandoning us after all this time. And Siga's like, I didn't even bother to notice. Nothing in this world means anything. So for Siga, everything is meaningless without his son Mika. Which is kind of like the whole thing with you, where Yu's like, my life has no meaning without my family. For Siga, he's like, I'm doing whatever I can to get my family back, because otherwise it has no meaning. I'm stuck in this world forever, doomed to walk eternity alone. I just want my son back. And Siga's like, or Rigor is like, if everything's meaningless, why do you have this single-minded determinist to bring your son back? Don't drag us into your problems. Yeah, Rigor's like, you just want to bring your kid back, but you made all of us immortal, and now we can't die, and we have to live with it. What are we supposed to do? And Erd's like, ooh. And I love that Siga's answer is, oh, become independent? like, just break off, and he just laughs about it. He's like, I even got involved in the Hakuya sect and became part of your grand plan. So we also established that Siga has blue blood. It's not red. Interesting. And I love that he's like, you've cut yourself free of my strings. You've bound and imprisoned me. And he's like, shut your mouth. All that ever comes out of it is lies. So then this thing gets brought up, which I talked about in the last volume. But I was like, yeah. So there was a kid, Mikhaila, that we know. So Mika. So then what is Mika and you? Because, yeah, Rigor brings it up. He's like, look, this kid showed up at the orphanage I was watching that had the same name, same face, Mikhaila. He's like, what is he? Did you finally find a vessel high enough up to your standards? Were the preparations for his resurrection complete? And he said, if you hadn't interrupted. And he's like, Maharu, Shinoa, you tampered with them all. And he's like, well, you planned on that. So I guess that Mika was that vessel he finally found. So did he plan to merge him with the angel version of his son? So did he just wait thousands of years until this kid was born that was just the right one? And Rigor like got everything. He says, I'm not God. He's like, I can't trust you. We have a mutual interest. He says, I said I can't trust you. Oh. So he tells Rigor that they have a mutual interest. And that he's not, which we find out what the mutual interest here is in a minute, but he said he's not God. So yeah, he's just a fallen angel. And then he has this stuff that comes out of all the vampires' heads, because the vampires all have, parts of him inside of him. He made all of them. So he's like, vampires cannot die. They become demons with no will of their own. They're condemned to a hell of eternal reliance on human desire. But if you listen to me... So we finally figure out that vampires are immortal and will eventually become demons. The blood thing is just a stall. They're going to eventually become demons and have no will of their own. Only relying on humans. Which kind of is, that seems like that's the price, right? You get this eternal life, but the price is you'll eventually be forced to submit yourself to a human and have to live off of them inside of them forever. And it's like, oh shit. But then Rigor is like, okay, we're not having enough brainwashing. Nah, we're just going to let that go. And he says, you aren't a normal vampire anymore, are you? And Rigor, at this point, Rigor's done so much tampering to his body. There's no telling what all is inside of him. He's blood magic, curses, control of divine punishment. He's like, I've augmented my body to the point where I can control the Seraph of the End and weaponize it. And he says, but who does that punishment come from? Considering your wings, you seem angelic. Where did you come from? Who is chasing you? And Siga's like, so we have all these questions, right? We have all these questions. And I'm running out of room. So we have all these questions that I'm just going to bring up here because why not? So we have all these questions with Sikamado. So the question is, who gives the punishment or orders the Seraphs? And he notes that Sega, he's like, considering your wings, you seem angelic. He says, where did you come from? Where did you come from? Who is chasing you? Which I hadn't even thought about the idea that something was chasing him. But yeah, it seems like he's running from something. Who and what are you? Who and what are you and Mika? And he says, your goal is to bring your son back to life. And if he's your son, he must be the same species as you. So I can't say if you're an angel or demon, but I know reviving one would take a large price. One so large, the other angels would punish the attempt. So yeah, so basically I'm wondering, I think Siga is a fallen angel and I think Mika is part demon. That something's happened and that was the cursed child. That Mika was the son of an angel and a demon and he's both. And that was the price to pay. That was the taboo that he couldn't break. And so he's like, I don't think we can allow that to happen. You did make us vow to maintain world order. So Siga, I like that we finally get the price. So the price is that we have 7 sinful keys. All right? 7 sinful keys, whatever. We don't know what makes up the sinful keys, but there's 7 of them. You have to gather those. And then the lives of every vampire. That's the kicker. And I like that Rigor and he's like, you left us to maintain order. He's like, well, that's just what we're going to do. We're going to maintain order. And so we find out, he's like, oh, the mutual interest. Yeah. He's like, this is the mutual interest you're talking about. And Siga's like, yeah, you all want to die, right? Well, you ought to be bored of living. He's like, so I'm going to help you do that. And then Rigor's like, oh, okay, great. He's like, no, I have a meaning for life now. I'm going to stop you. So that's the thing. Again, it's the idea of everything being on their terms. Rigor is like, yeah, no, I'm tired of living. But you mean you just groomed us all to be these immortals so that you could kill us all in the end to bring back your kid? Nope. I don't like that. Rigor's like, no. He's like, sorry, everyone. He's like, I come back for the first... I love he says, I come back for the first time in ages, and now I have to be selfish. He's like, but... And I love that Erd says, when have you not made a selfish demand? And we have the same hand-holding that they all have. He's like, we can't trust his words. Something could happen to the world, and there's no guarantee we'll die properly if we listen. So we stay alive and stop Michaela's resurrection and stabilize the world. And I'll search for a way for us to finally die, I promise. So this is setting up something insane, which we'll get into. And so Erd's like, yeah, we'll protect the world together. And the only reason Kai Luke is involved is because he's like, well, Erd's doing it. And Leskar's like, welcome home, Rigor. We'll find our own way to die. And so we get here to the place with everything involved and all the coffins. And there's the coffins everywhere that have like all... And I love that they just strategically placed arrows with people's names on it to show all the people there. And so there's a price. There is a price to pay to bring everybody back. And so it's the 7 sinful keys, which we have to have. It says one of the people involved in setting off the spell, one will be cursed with eternal life. So one cursed with eternal life. Okay. The 7 sinful keys and the lives of every vampire sacrificed. With those 3 things, we can bring back all of the humans. Okay. And Yu's like, now how does this work then? Mika's a demon now. Are Farad and Cruel gonna die? And so then Guren's like, yeah, but they want to die. And so that explains everything. That Farad is helping, as is Cruel, because they want to die. Farad's done. Farad's like, I've been trying to die for centuries and I can't do it. So of course Farad would be on board with this because he's like, yeah, this is my chance. Why not? And if it screws over Rigor, even better. So Farad's on board with this because he's like, it's going to screw over Rigor, so let's do it. So you have that. Cruel wants to die because she wants to be reunited with her brother. And she's like, my brother's a demon and he's forced to suffer feeding off human desires. If he's gone, then that means that we can be together again, right? I'm assuming this means the demons are going to die. So that means the demons are going to die as well as... And basically, if they do these 3 things, if they have the 7 sinful keys, every vampire will be sacrificed, and the curse will be eternal life. So instead of humanity dying, it's going to be vampires this time. Instead of sacrificing all of humanity, we're going to sacrifice all the vampires. And to resurrect humans coming back. And someone will be cursed with eternal life. Which I'm guessing happened to Sikamado way back when, that he was the one cursed with eternal life for breaking the taboo. I don't know. We don't know enough about that. We still have questions about that. So I'm going to put this over here. But yeah, so it's all coming together. There's still a lot of questions that we don't know that I'm going to write up here in a minute. But yeah, but so, but it seems like the only person who would have a conflict of interest is Michaela. He's Shikamaru's son. The price to resurrect him is the same as what it takes to bring back humanity, which means we're stuck with a choice. Do we bring back everyone's family or Mika? So, yeah. So give me a second. We're going to break this down of what we've got left because it's all shaking up very interestingly in this. So, so we found out, so we have the 7 sinful keys. Well, I know we have 4 so far, right? There's 4 that we have so far, so we're missing 3. So this story isn't, I felt like with the end of this chapter, I was like, wow, we are getting into, again, either the halfway point or 3rd act of this series. But we don't have, I feel like we're not going to be at the final act of this series until we gather up all the sinful keys. I still think we have quite a ways to go with this story. But now the stakes are set, right? Because you had to have 7 sinful keys. Someone has to become immortal. So when Guren said that someone had to become immortal as the price to pay for the curse, is Guren immortal now? Is Guren immortal? Because that would make sense if he sacrificed himself and became immortal because to bring back Shinya and them, maybe. But here's the thing. The last time they did this, it was only for 10 years. Is Guren going to mention that? I want to feel like, will humanity be back for 10 years or permanently? That's the question. Because, like, will humanity / Mikaela, will they only back for 10 years? Because that was the gist with this time around. Or was it because Guren didn't do it the right way the first time? He didn't have the sinful keys. So the taboo was not complete. And so it only lasted 10 years. That's a question to go off of. And then the lives of all the vampires will be sacrificed instead of humanity. So we have 3 factions here now that have kind of surfaced because of this. We have to choose, if we follow these steps, we have to choose either bringing humanity back or Mikaela back to human form. Obviously, Sikamado wants Mikaela back, and you, it seems like, you wants Mikaela back. So it's funny that we had that flashback in chapter 113 where Siga's like, you and I will work together to bring Mika back. And Yu's like, yeah. And now they literally are in present time. So it's like, it's funny that your main antagonist and your main protagonist have the same goal. And it's like, what? That's so insane to me that I'm like, our bad guy and our protagonist, our hero, have the same objective. It's insane, and I love it. So you have that. You have Guren, who's like, no, I choose humanity. Guren's animosity towards Mika makes so much sense now. He's like, no, I had to have you and Mika come together to get this far in my plan. He's like, but I am not interested in bringing Mika back. I want everyone else back. He's like, if you choose Mika alone, that makes you our enemy. And he's like, everybody pay attention to what Yu does and pick who you'll fight for. And I like that Mitsuba and Yoichi say, no, you, like they decided, and Shino and Kimazuki are like, because Kimazuki, is going to want Mirai back, so that's going to create a conflict. And again, damn it, you, Mika, because Mika is Mika, Mika's like, hey, you, it's okay. I can go. We'll bring the kids back. It'll be okay. We'll bring back Connie and the kids. And Yu's like, no, Mika, come to me. It's like, So you have these 2 camps. You have Sikamado and Yu who want Mikaela back. You have Guren who wants humanity back. We don't know where the rest of the Mitsuba squad stand. I can see them being divided, right? I definitely think Kimazuki is leaning more towards Guren's side. Yoichi, I would think so, but I'm not sure. And then Mitsuba and Shinoa are kind of caught in the mix. But then with Ferret and Cruel and Crowley, we don't know what Crowley stands on all this. Is Crowley wanting to die? I feel like Crowley's so nonchalant, he'll just be like, whatever you guys think. But we don't know his opinions. I think Ferret and Cruel can go either way. Ferret and Cruel do not care who ends up getting chosen. They don't. Ferret and Cruel are like, we don't care which side you pick. We just want somebody to get resurrected so we can die. So our time is up. So I feel like Ferret and Cruel are like, whatever y'all pick, just decide amongst yourselves and then tell us, and then we'll just show up and be there to help. So I feel like that's their whole deal. But then, so you have these 2 factions fighting each other, and then you have the rest of the vampires, Rigor and Erd and Kailuk and Leskar, who are like, we don't want any of this. We don't want to die. They're like, they want to die, but they want it to be on their terms. They're like, we don't want our existence to have just been to be Sigamadu's guinea pigs and a sacrifice, and that's it. They're like, we want to know how to die so we can die, but we don't want to just die with no purpose other than to help you. It's kind of like, you're our enemy, why would we want to help you even if it means giving us what we want? Oh my gosh. And I like that everyone draws their weapons except for Shinoa, who can't draw her weapon because she doesn't have the powers anymore. They've been taken away. Ah, damn it. Damn it. Oh my god. Ah! So yeah. So this is great. We have 3 factions. We have one side that wants none of this to happen, and then we have 2 sides that want it to happen but for different reasons. And so, again, the fact that Sikamado and Yu are essentially fighting for the same thing, just for different, because they both care about Mika, is wonderful, and I love it. But yeah, so we have lots of questions about Yu, about Mika from the orphanage. We have lots of questions about that. So Yu and Mika, their whole origins, Sikamado origins, that stuff's all. Crowley's thoughts on this. We've got Crowley's thoughts to consider, like, what will the vampires do? Are they just going to restrain Yu and try to keep him away while they get the keys? Like, what's going to happen? There's so much stuff that's left to tell in this story that's exciting to me, but I'm really glad that we finally have explanations and all the stakes are made. Like we finally have, it's like, this feels like the end of Act 2, but it's been a long Act 2. And I feel like we're finally like, okay, no. Or the next chapter is about to be the end of Act 2. So, the next volume, I mean. Oh my gosh. Ah! I love it. This volume is one of my favorites. And I'm like, finally, we finally got some answers. Good. And I talked for nearly an hour just about this volume. Just about this one volume. So that was fun. That's a fun time. But yeah. Oh my gosh, guys. I can't believe we're caught up with Seraph of the End. But like I said, the good news is chapters 115, 116, and 117 just came out. So we really only have chapters 118 and 119. So 118 is supposed to come out September 2nd, I think. So 119 should be out around October 2nd or around October 3rd. So my goal is that around October, we'll read chapters 115 to 119 for volume 28. It's going to be such a hard wait. It's going to be such a hard wait because those of you that have read the manga already know what's coming. So I ask, please no manga spoilers past chapter 114. Please no manga spoilers. It's going to be such a hard wait, but it's only like a month and a half. We're like nearly midway through August, so it's just a month and a half. I can wait. I can wait. I can wait a month and a half to find out what's going to happen with our boy Yu. So yeah. I have so much exciting things to think about with this series. I am going to work on reading the light novels and finishing those up. So sometime around September, I'm hoping to have a review of those out here on Patreon and YouTube. And that'll be kind of like our little halfway point in between getting ready for volume 28, which will be fun. But in the meantime, next week I'm going to start a new show. I'm going to be starting Mob Psycho 100. So way back when Bungo Stray Dogs ended, back in December of last year, it's been like 8 months. Y'all voted for Seraph of the End to replace Bungo Stray Dogs, and Mob Psycho was like 2 votes off. And so I was like, you know what, 2 votes off. I've wanted to watch Mob Psycho for a long time. I'm going to go ahead and watch it when I'm done and caught up with Seraph of the End. And here we are. So next week I'm going to start Mob Psycho, and that's going to be on our Sunday slot. And then once volume 28 comes out, we'll just review it and have it here on the channel. So I'm really excited. I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I'm so curious to know your thoughts about this volume. Oh my gosh, what a roller coaster. But in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Seraph of the End. Bye.